The BC legislature finally back in session. And so much on the election, just so much on the election. And the Liberals spending money with Facebook after saying that they were the devil and they were protecting us from them. And now they're spending money with them as usual. There you go. All that and more on the Really Big Show. Sorry we had another technical glitch this morning. We're starting off late. And we're going to try and rush through this because we got another thing going at 10 here. So thank you for joining us on the phone with me, Ian Burns. Again, a little bit of technical difficulties. You don't even have his picture there, but that's fine. Ian, how are things in Ottawa? Cloudy here and all socked in with rain here.
I think it's actually pretty much the same weather for once, but we're both in this kind of sad limbo.
There you go. You ready to get into it?
Let's go.
Let's go. The BC legislature finally going to sit. Is that like finally? Like the election was when?
November. Yeah. I mean,
November.
actually, no, it was October, wasn't it? It was October the
Yeah.
20th or October the 19th, I believe, actually. Yeah, I mean, it's just a bit outrageous, frankly, isn't it? It's funny because teachers, as I'm sure you're aware, they get gently mocked from time to time, don't they? Because they get a full-time salary, a big boy salary, but they only work, two-thirds of the year or something like that. And they get gently sort of chided about that. And yet here we have these MLAs and MPs who get double or triple the money of teachers, and also have so much more power and influence. And yet they barely ever work. It's kind of like, I mean, it really is a dream job, isn't it?
Yeah, so the carbon tax supposedly going to get eliminated tomorrow. We'll see where that goes. And also, he's got some stuff to answer for with this Bill 7 too, as well. And he's kind of like scaled that back, but it doesn't sound like he's completely scrapped it though, right?
Well, he's also not completely scrapped the carbon tax either, because the industrial bit of it is still going to
Yeah.
stay there. And obviously, we all have to get our seatbelts on and get ready for what's coming to fill that $1.5 billion black hole or whatever that's created by the removal of the carbon tax. Because obviously, somebody like David Eby and the NDP, they're not going to want to just let that money go. They're going to want that revenue from somewhere else because they're big spenders, aren't they?
Yeah, since the NDP have been in power in British Columbia, since they took over from the BC United Party, 33 new taxes in British Columbia. So how many more can they add, I guess is the question, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually quite interested to see what they do. Because BC, obviously, as we know, it's kind of an innovator in many ways, isn't it? I think it was the first carbon tax in the whole of North America was in BC. So they're tax innovators. So I'll be very interested to see what it is they choose to tax to bring in that extra revenue, because that's probably going to be a sign of the times. And in 10 years or something, the rest of Canada will have whatever tax it is that EB chooses.
Yeah, and we got lots going on in the election, so we're going to get right into it. We're going to play our little intro here. Again, hopefully we don't have any glitches, but election 2025. And we're going to kick it off with Pierre Poilievre demands Carney drop Liberal candidate who told crowd to hand over Canadian to China. And lots going on with that.
Yeah, I mean, Carney has since come out and because he went all quiet over the weekend, presumably he was in some kind of war room where they were deciding what to do about this. But Carney came out this morning as he slurped on a cup of tea or whatever it was and said that he's going to keep this guy because, in his words, in Mark Carney's words, he's made an apology and he's also apologized to me personally. That's what he said. But yeah, he's accused. Well, he's not just accused. I mean, he did at a news conference say that he wanted the Conservative candidate to be seized by the Chinese, or he sort of implored people to get hold of this guy and give him to the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, because there's a bounty on his head, um, which was put in place by Hong Kong, the police in Hong Kong. So I mean, it's an absolutely astonishing act, really. I mean, it's very hard to compare this to anything else. It's craziness, absolutely mad, considering that China is effectively a hostile nation and,
Let's
and
let's
also has just recently executed 4 Canadians.
let's listen to Mark Carney explain why he is not going to have him step down.
Paul Chang, one of your candidates in Markham, talked about turning over a conservative candidate to the Chinese consulate to receive a bounty placed on him by the Chinese Communist Party. Can you explain why you've not dropped him as a Liberal candidate?
Thank you for the question. Look, the comments were deeply offensive. This is a terrible lapse of judgment by Mr. Chang. He has apologized for those comments. He has apologized directly now to the person that he mentioned. Apologized directly to him yesterday. I've spoken to Mr. Chang as well over the course of the weekend to understand his position. He is a veteran policeman. Mr. Chang is a veteran policeman with more than a quarter-century of service to his community. 28 years of defending rights in this community, and he will continue with his candidacy going forward, having made those apologies very clearly to the individual, to the community, and moving forward to serve.
What is that, Nick?
That was Xi Jinping trying to call Mark Carney to congratulate him, I
There you
think.
go. It must be.
But yeah, I mean
Wow.
that is such a feeble excuse, isn't it? It's like, well, he was a cop for so many years and he upheld rights and he said sorry. I mean, I don't mean to be I don't mean to sound harsh here, but Derek Chauvin also was a cop for a long time, wasn't he? And he
Well, he
also
should know.
apologized.
He
Doesn't mean
should
he's
know
not guilty
better.
of doing something wrong.
Yeah, as a police officer, he should know better. He should know better about rights and that, and about turning somebody over to the Hong Kong police where they have executed 4 Canadians. Here's a piece from Judy Trin here at CTV. We're going to play this clip.
Paul Chang made these comments in.
Is the pressure to boot him is going to continue?
Absolutely. Vashi, look at just what has happened. You mentioned that Paul Chang made these comments in January. But since then, China has executed 4 Canadians, right? Mm-hmm. So we still remember very clearly what happened to the 2 Michaels. What is significant about this, about Paul Chang's comments in regards to the Conservative candidate, is that Joe Tay is considered a democracy activist. He's been outspoken on his YouTube channel in terms of pointing out all the ways that the Hong Kong government has violated civil rights. So the point of the matter is that the Hong Kong government, Hong Kong police, basically does the bidding of the Chinese Communist government now. They are acting on behalf of China. So right now, the fact that someone could say that, you know, even in a joking manner, that perhaps someone should turn in Joe Tay to the Chinese consulate, first of all, not a joke at all. And the other thing is, we have to remember that democracy activists across the world have been kidnapped by Chinese agents and basically disappeared into the prison system and possibly executed. So Mark Carney has to act. The Liberal Party has to act on this, because not acting shows that they are not taking foreign interference seriously and are once again turning a blind eye, perhaps in the future, to meddling.
Mike, what are you watching for the Conservatives this week?
There you go, Nick. You can put that there. There you go.
Abysmal, awful. And I would say, you know, like the Canadian passport is already looked upon, I think, with a certain amount of suspicion, let's say, or a little bit of doubt, let's put it, by a lot of people who have dual nationality from other countries like Iran and, you know, elsewhere in the world. China is obviously another one. People are already a little bit concerned about the extent to which the federal government will go to bat for them if the other country, their other nationality, comes after them. I mean, we've seen this so many times. We saw it with the when a plane was shot down, and contained, quite a large number of Canadians, nothing really happened. There was no real punishment. I mean, and then we have this, that the Chinese have, the Chinese do this all over the Western world, but I think they look at Canada as like easy pickings sort of thing. They look at Canada as soft. And look what they've done with obviously the two Michaels situation, executing Canadians. But they also set up these like mini little police stations and they try and bully and harass Canadian citizens in this country. And the federal government doesn't really do anything about it. So I mean, this is terrible. It's a terrible look because, like I say, a lot of people they think they get their Canadian citizenship and they think, okay, now I've got the Canadian government now will protect me. And unfortunately, the reality is that that's not really true. They don't really, they can't, maybe you could argue, but they also don't even really try. So it's a reminder, I think, for a lot of people, a lot of dual nationals especially, that they're on their own.
Yeah, it seems like there's been so much Chinese interference. You even think back to the Winnipeg labs and then the with the Wuhan connection, and then like election interference and all that. And like it doesn't seem like the Liberals react very strongly to any of this Chinese interference. And here we have somebody calling for an elected official to be turned over to the Hong Kong police, especially what that Judy said there. Like after they've executed at least 4 that they know of, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, it's just appalling, isn't it? Like, you can't emphasize enough. China is a hostile state to Canada. We also have trouble with India, of course, but India is not a hostile state. India is, maybe a neutral state, you would say. But China actually is hostile to Canada. It tries to undermine Canada in many ways. So the Chinese interference in Canadian democracy and society is much more significant than the Indian one. And yet it seems to me that Justin Trudeau's government, at least, was much more interested in Indian involvement in Canadian society rather than Chinese involvement.
well, maybe it all goes back to that time when they held his plane there for a few days and said that there might have been drugs on the plane.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, he's had a lot of bad times, hasn't he? I don't know if we want to go back over all those bad times of our previous prime minister.
Definitely not a great relationship. They always seem very confrontational with the Indian government and very apologetic, or even like ignoring some of the threats from the Chinese government.
Well, I mean, you have to categorize things, don't you? You have to go all the way back to our good friend Aristotle, and you have to have some kind of system for categorization. And you have to acknowledge that India, even though it's done a lot of dirty deeds, it's done a lot of bad things to Canada, it's not an out and out enemy of Canada, but China is. There's no doubt about it. They are an enemy of Canada's, and they look at Canada as an enemy. So you have to be clever. You have to put them in the right basket.
Yeah. And then let's move on to the Candyman, Ken, because lots of policy stuff being thrown out this weekend. Well, Pierre Poilievre a lot busier than the rest of them. Pierre Poilievre with an announcement that this is a tweet from Tracy Gray here, that puts Canadian workers first. This is actually a really good policy, and I know because I used to work in a mine site, and a lot of the people used to complain. We're going to play this clip first, and then we'll talk about it.
Imagine you're a pipe fitter who has to travel from Timmins to Fort Mac, or an oil worker who has to travel from Nova Scotia to offshore fields in Newfoundland. These are the people who build our country, and there are whole communities of them. I've met these workers as I've crossed the country over the last several years, whether they're flying up to Northern Ontario to work in logging operations or mines, or traveling to the British Columbia interior from Alberta to build the liquefaction facilities there. And to do their jobs, they have to travel often 20 times a year. And yet the Carney Trudeau Liberals only allow them to write off $4,000 worth of travel expenses. But you know who doesn't have any limits on what they can write off? Corporate CEOs. CEOs are able to write off their private jets to fly all over the place, even when it would be just as easy to take a commercial flight. Oftentimes, corporations write off these private jets for their CEOs and other executives to benefit from the luxury of global travel, all while their workers make too little money and their consumers pay far too high prices. This is an abuse of our tax system. That's why I'm announcing today that common sense conservatives will stop corporations from writing off private jets used for luxury executive travel. We will only allow corporations to write off the equivalent of a commercial airline flight. And we will pass the Tax Fairness for Traveling Trades Workers Act, allowing our trade workers to write off the full cost of their food, transportation, and accommodation for any job-related trips that go more than 120 kilometers, regardless of whether they require lodgings. We also ensure that charter flights to remote locations with no commercial flight options will be exempt from my law, so that no tradespeople are impacted when they travel to remote areas for work. Trades workers deserve the same tax rules as CEOs when they travel to get the job done. My common sense conservative government will restore Canada's promise that anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, that hard work leads to a great life in a beautiful home, on a safe street, protected by brave soldiers under a proud flag. That's what it means to put Canada first. Now let's bring it home.
There you go, Nick. I mean, who could be against that? I know I worked at a remote mine site, and the guys used to complain quite a bit about that, not being able to write off all the stuff that it cost them. And then, like you said, the corporate jets that fly everywhere, you know, a lot more expensive to fly in a corporate jet, and making that more fair seems like a reasonable thing for Canadians.
I do kind of wonder though, like here we are, we're sort of like less than a month away from an election. Why exactly is Pierre Poilievre concentrating on a group of people that I think are almost certainly going to vote for him anyway? You know, it's almost like Mark Carney coming out with a policy to appeal to mortgage-free boomers that still think it's 1995 or something like that. It's like, don't worry, mate. Like they're going to vote for you anyway. So I'm kind of wondering what he's doing there from a tactical or strategic perspective, let's say. But I mean, obviously it makes sense, and I'm sure this will be very popular with a lot of people. But I do just sense that basically all of those people will be voting for him already.
Well, I can tell you right now, like, you know, like people, especially the people that live on the Rock, Newfoundland and stuff like that, that travel a lot for their, because they can't find enough work on the Rock. It would probably swing them, because that is a very, like Atlantic provinces, a lot of those people look elsewhere, especially look to Alberta to get work, right? So a lot of people
That
from,
is actually a good point. Yeah, and the Maritimes, we should remember they looked like they were going to go Tory, but now they seem to have swung back to the Liberals. So maybe it's
I mean,
targeted at the Maritimes. You're right, yeah.
Alberta employs many, many people from the Maritimes and the Rock, and even from the Thunder Bay, when it used to be the mining was booming, and you know, even Quebec and in Ontario, and now a lot of those people have to travel elsewhere for that, right? So
Yeah, but even still, I mean, even if we operate under that assumption, there aren't very many ridings there, are there, in the Maritimes? Just
no, no.
the way it works, it's kind of like you just have to absolutely blitz Ontario, don't you? And Quebec.
Yeah.
That's basically how this whole electoral system works, and it isn't really very very fair in some ways.
There you go. Meta the devil, according to the Liberals. And guess who's spending tons of money? This is a story from the Western Standard. We're going to do it too. The Liberals spending thousands on Facebook ads. Even the Liberal government is spending millions on Facebook now, after they said they're devil, and that they would never, ever spend money with Meta again, because they're supposedly looking out for independent journalism. But, you know, their actions speak differently.
Something that I thought was quite interesting there is I put it in the document, so I guess Nick can show us. But over the last 7 days, they've spent $200,000 with the Liberal Party and nearly $300,000 with Mark Carney's personal account, which sort of tells you what their election strategy is. It's basically just try and pretend that we're not Liberals and push Mark Carney right to the front, and Mark Carney is everything. Like he's the beginning and the end of this campaign, isn't he? But in terms of the hypocrisy, I mean, what can you say? I don't even know what to say. It's kind of, this is how, I'm not saying that the Liberals or Mark Carney are authoritarians or anything here necessarily, but the authoritarian governments of the 20th century, mid 20th century, this is kind of what they did, isn't it? It's like, how do you do something so obviously hypocritical and outrageous and get away with it? And it's almost like you just make it so big. It's such a huge, obvious, gigantic act of hypocrisy and deceit that your opponents almost don't know what to do. They're like they're flustered and they just don't know what to say, how to react. And that's kind of how I feel now. It's like obviously Goebbels referred to this as the big lie. I'm not trying to say that Mark Carney is like Goebbels particularly, but I do feel like that's the situation we're in here with the Liberal Party, where they've committed such an egregious act of hypocrisy and deceit that it's almost left me speechless.
Yeah, it's just it's if you take it back to the Paul Chang thing, it just seems like they don't care. They really don't care. And I have talked to a few Liberal voters, even one that like is here, and he basically said when I asked him these questions is that basically you have to, and this is really kind of like I don't know, I don't even want to say it, but he said he'd literally have to see Mark Carney killing babies before he would vote for a Conservative. And I was just like, so no bridge too far for some people. The Liberals can continue to do whatever they want to do. They won't be held accountable. This Meta war with Meta, which they now basically come out and just become hypocrites, and they block news outlets. Close to 100 have failed since we're coming up to the 2-year anniversary of this metal block. We're the only country in the G7 that has no news allowed on Facebook and Instagram. No news, but they can spend money like crazy with the government spends money, and as does the Liberal Party spend money on Meta, which they said they're protecting us from. Some protection.
So yeah, and in effect that means that we're having an election now where the most important social media website in the world and in Canada, which is Facebook, but also, I mean, Instagram is pretty important as well, which is owned by the same company, of course.
Yeah.
But we're going into this election where actual news, so by neutral parties or by people who are actually trying to find the truth, like journalists, that's banned from those two platforms. Instead, you're going to be bombarded with phony garbage by spin doctors at the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party and the NDP. And there's not going to be any kind of mediation. There's not going to be anybody that's going to point out to you, like, hold on, Mark Carney says he wants to do this, but actually, if you look at this document and like important context, instead of that, you're just going to get a video from Mark Carney, and that's like in place of news. I mean, it's so damaging to democracy and to the integrity of the elections. You would really think that academia and also the Liberal Party would be up in arms about this and talking about the terrible democratic deficit and what this means for our elections and what this means for just Canada in general. And it's, Canada's on life support. You'd expect to see that kind of thing, wouldn't you? But instead, nothing, not a thing is said. The Liberal Party desperately want to ignore this. I've already, as I've mentioned a number of times, tried to speak to the federal government before the writ was dropped. I tried to ask them about this question and was literally just ignored several times. They just did not respond to my requests for a comment, something that they're really not supposed to do, but they just really did not want to speak about this issue. They want it to be buried 1,000 feet in the ground, and they never want to talk about it. And I mean, that alone should make people angry and suspicious, I think.
I think you could almost talk to anybody and you would say that a free and independent media is essential as one of the pillars of democracy. And yet, if you tell them about this, they'll just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, well, the Liberals must have a plan. And it sure seems like they have a plan that keeps news media off of there while they can put propaganda on there.
Well, often I think people would say, yeah, look, Mark Zuckerberg, like he has misbehaved and they do need to fix some of that stuff on there or something like that. But I mean, if that's the case, then why is the Liberal Party pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it will be millions very soon, into Mark Zuckerberg's pocket? Why is that happening?
And it's not just the Liberal Party, it's the Liberal government that's been doing it since you're one of the few outlets in Canada that broke that story.
Yeah, it's over $1 million that the federal government spent to promote various things, including, I mean, the biggest chunk went to the CRA to remind people to file their taxes and to
that was,
talk about the great virtues
GST
of
break.
paying your taxes.
Yeah, and the GST break. And that was a while ago, so we'll have to check in and see where that number is at right now. In
Indeed,
fairness,
yeah.
we've got an ad here from Mark Carney that I'm sure is on Facebook as well, and he's talking about building houses. Let's go ahead and play that, Nick.
We used to build things in this country. After the Second World War, Canada faced a housing crisis. The government built prefabricated homes that were easy to assemble and inexpensive. And those homes are still here 80 years later. Now we're in another housing crisis. And it's time your government got back into the business of building affordable homes. We will build new homes for Canadians at a pace not seen since the Second World War. We'll build a Canada you can afford.
There you go. Trudeau's Liberals, before he resigned, said they were going to build 650,000 homes a year. And then there was an internal memo that leaked that said they knew full well that that was not even close to true, and that the maximum that they could build is around 272. That was from CMHC. And now Carney is promising 500,000 homes, a little bit lighter than Trudeau's 650,000 homes. But again, that leaked memo said they were put that out knowing full well that that was an unrealistic goal.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is probably unrealistic as well, isn't it? National Bank did I think it was National Bank, anyway, did a big sort of study on this when when Trudeau first made that promise, and they pretty much shot it to pieces, and they just said it's just simply impossible. It's physically impossible.
Here's the lead point in this, and this is where, like Ronald Reagan quote comes to mind. If the government says we're here to help run, because his lead point there, they're going to build Canada homes to get the federal government back into the business of home building by acting as a developer to build affordable housing at scale. So the government itself is going to build homes. Where is that going to end? How much do you think these homes are going to cost if the government itself is building homes instead of private enterprise?
Yeah, it's I yeah, I wouldn't put much faith in this, to be honest. But I also found it funny there where he said, and he said this a few times now, but where he said, we used to build things in Canada. And I kind of think, like, steady on, Mark. Like, think about it for a minute. Why do we not build now? It's because of various lobbies that prevent that from happening. Number one is the environmental lobby, which is 100% in Mark Carney's camp. So there's one group that he's already alienated. Number two is NIMBYs, which tends to be mortgage-free older people, like, seniors who want a nice quiet life and they don't want their view to be destroyed that they have. Okay, they're also basically 100% liberal. And then the other group that comes to mind would be sort of First Nations, which are also kind of split between NDP and Liberal, so kind of in his camp. So who's he going to alienate? Which of those groups is he going to alienate? Because that's why stuff doesn't get built.
And here's the other point in here, and this is where I wanted to. What's the point of municipal governments? Because here the BC's government said, they said to the municipalities that this is how it works for development. Now in this point here, it says we're going to cut municipal development charges in half. So, what's the point of a municipal government if the feds and both the province want to interfere with the municipalities?
Exactly, yeah. And they are high, those charges, but they do have to actually do quite a lot of stuff, don't they? Like link you up to the sewage system and all that. Like, I mean, who's going to pay for that? Who's going to make all that happen?
They've been busy. My daughter was at the mall, at Orchard Park Mall here this weekend, and there was a leaflet put on all the cars that said that basically Pierre Poilievre will defund all the housing across Canada so that there will be no affordable housing. And the Liberals, they forget that the Liberals are running this country for 10 years. And housing has skyrocketed. It's out of reach for most people. They want to take no responsibility for that. It just seems odd, right? That they could put that leaflet on there. On the leaflet, it should say, we're sorry for what we've done. That's what they should start with, right?
But that is the glory of the switcheroo, isn't it? Because they've got a new leader, and now it's almost like it's a different party, isn't it? And at least they can pretend it's a different party. Whereas if they continued with Trudeau, it wouldn't have been possible to do that.
One of the things to expand on that is the Liberals like to think, because the parliamentary system is different than the US system, right? Because we really have MPs that are all supposed to represent their ridings, and you're not supposed to, we don't really have a president that has these executive powers. But one of the things that Carney did when he sat down there with the carbon tax, he kind of signed a, like a fake kind of order on that to kind of give that impression that he was signing an executive order. And the same thing here is they seem to be just really pushing. It's just one man, right? Like one man. And then that's how it switches the party, because it's the same team of MPs. And even the person that many people would say has caused the most grief for Canada, Stephen Gibault, as the environment minister, which has caused a lot of the non-projects going forward, is basically his second in charge now. He's the lieutenant for Quebec. So
Yeah, well, and another person that attracts a lot of negative comments would be Chrystia Freeland,
yeah,
and she still remains pretty powerful. She's got quite an important job still at transport.
Jolie's
So
still there.
yeah, and
Like
I mean it is
his
like it's a lot
cabinet.
of the same old faces.
I mean, his cabinet's basically the same. Melanie Jolie's there. Do you know what I mean? And he even brought back people that Trudeau fired. So there's that.
Yeah. His friends, yeah.
His a friend in need is a friend indeed, right? And this one is one of the most interesting. There's another policy thing from Polyev. And this one I think would stoke a lot. This thing would be huge if this happened in Canada, because the Liberals brought out the increase in the taxable capital gains. This is like one of the best policies I've seen as an accountant. I would say, well, this would actually stir investment in Canada, because a lot of that money is fleeing to the United States. But this is saying if you sell something that has capital gains tax payable and you reinvest it into Canadian stocks or Canadian properties in that, you wouldn't pay no capital gains. This would be huge for Canada. The current capital gains tax lockups and investment and all that's because they're selling would force a big bill. Yes, a lot of people don't sell stuff because they don't want to pay the capital gains tax. Look at this. This would stoke investment. This would stoke building, hiring, investing, and growing. This would be huge for Canada. And either party should adopt this. I mean, if Carney's going to steal anything, steal this one.
Yeah, and I think he probably will, to be honest, because it is quite a shrewd idea, given the investment landscape in Canada and how desperately Canada needs investment.
This would unlock billions and billions of dollars of investment almost immediately. This would be huge for Canada. Absolutely huge. It's probably one of his best policies that he's brought out. Absolutely one of the best policies ever. So there you go.
He's been busy, hasn't he? I mean, he's clearly got this like treasure chest of policies that he's pulling out one per day, isn't he? I wonder if that's going to be all the way till election day.
And then this next one, again, like Polyev really busy this weekend. Carney taking some time off to sip on some tea. This next one here, creating a Canada First national energy corridor. This would be huge for energy companies looking to build, because we've seen companies like, even Teck, when they bailed on the Fort Mac project there, after spending $1.5 billion, they need certainty. And this would give those kind of companies certainty if there was actually a qualified and all permitted, so they can say, yeah, you can build a pipeline. It's already it's done. You just go ahead and build your pipeline, go ahead and build transmission lines, go ahead and do all this stuff, because it's already permitted. And this would be a tough one for, it'll be a tough one for Pierre to get done, but it'll also be almost an impossible one for the Liberals to ever copy this one, because Stephen Gibault is there is basically his second in command, and there's no way he's going to give a green light without looking like, flipping everything over and over and over again before anything ever happens, right?
Yeah, well, it's not even just that, is it? I mean, it's not just Guilbeault, who is ultimately just one chap, but it's the fact that there are lots of people in Canada that will decide who they vote for based on how hostile they are to pipeline plans or whatever, or any kind of development of natural resources. There are people that look upon that as just universally bad. And Carney is and this is also true of Trudeau, they kind of succeeded in getting the majority of those people. So yeah, I mean, he risks alienating his coalition, which is, kind of goes back to what I was saying there when he's talking about how he wants to make Canada build again. I mean, I don't know how he's going to do that while maintaining his coalition.
Yeah, between 2015 and 2020, Canada canceled 16 major energy projects, resulting in a $176 billion hit to our economy. The Liberals killed the Energy East pipeline and passed Bill C-69, the No New Pipelines Law, which makes it all but impossible to build pipelines and energy infrastructure we need to strengthen the Canadian economy. I mean, those are all things that were done, and they were very proud of it at the time. Remember, Karina Gold said we need to landlock Alberta's oil and gas. And Alberta's oil and gas, the only way they can sell it really is into the U.S. And there's always been a huge discount to Western Canadian Select because we only have one customers, and the Liberals are responsible for that. So when they talk about diversification, a lot of that rests on them because they're the ones that blocked it. It takes 18 years to get a mine permitted here in Canada. That's 23% longer than Australia and 38% longer in the U.S. And with what's going on in the U.S., it's going to be a lot faster in the U.S. to get anything done. So there you go. Canada ranks
I would say
now.
as well, I mean, Australia and the US aren't really our rivals so much in the grand sense, and talking about the rest of this century. Our rivals are China and Russia. How long do you think it takes them to get a mine open?
Yeah, like probably the weekend. Canada ranks 23rd in the World's Bank of Easy Doing Business in the index, a 7-place drop since 2015. And here's something that Canadians need to know 100%. 98% of our crude went to the U.S. and it all went at a discount. It all went at a discount because we have no options. We have no options. That's why Western Canadian Select sells at a discount to Texas Oil and all that. It's just because there's nowhere else for it to go. And then Brian Lilly put out a tweet here, said that the Quebec newspaper put out a 4-page spread on Mark Carney, not very favorable as well. So you can go, if you can read French, there you go. You got yourself something to read. And then on to some other news outside of the election. The board upholds CERB firing. This is where they fired a bunch of government employees. A federal labor board, in its first ruling of its kind, upheld the firing of a government employee who falsely claimed thousands in pandemic relief. And this person actually was an employment insurance benefits officer with the Department of Employment. And she was there for 20 years, and she said she didn't really know the rules, and she was just applying, but she was getting her full check while she was off at home. But she applied, and she took 7 payments from the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, pocketing $14,000, while still receiving her full department salary, which makes her ineligible for help, right? So she was at home, getting paid fully, and then plus took extra money, and she worked for the EI office. And at least 49 other Department of Employment staff are fired as CERB cheats. The department said in a 2023 briefing note, acknowledged that numerous irregularities in the program that stored over budget that was supposed to be around $24 billion that they were going to spend. $81.6 billion went out. Figures show 190,000 quit their jobs to claim that $2,000 a month check. 1,522 prisoners got money, and 704 claimants who didn't even live in Canada. 430 kids under 15, and also 391 dead people got benefits.
I'm surprised those numbers aren't higher, to be honest.
Sounds like we might need some Doge here in Canada.
Yeah, well, I mean, the CERB scheme was quite obviously open to massive exploitation, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then Information Commission's Caroline Maynard has ordered the Department of Justice to disclose the thousands of memos regarding ongoing concealment of post-war files on Nazi fugitives led into Canada. The department promised to comply with a deadline, but only after the election campaign. Why is that? Why not release it now? Right?
Well, they're supposed to go into quiet mode, aren't they, during an election?
But I mean, this has been asked for a long time too, right? There's been reluctance by the Liberal Party.
Yeah, but I mean, these bloody Nazis. I thought they keep showing up. They're also doing something like this in Argentina, aren't they? I don't know if you've seen that. It's like just lots of Nazi news, even though it was like 80 years ago that the Nazi regime was destroyed. They're still in the headlines.
Yeah, so memos obtained last January 14th confirmed federal archivists were concealing more than 1 million pages of records on Nazi collaborators in Canada. This is upwards of 1 million pages of material, likely including some of the material classified top secret. There you go.
Nazis. Well, one of them was in Parliament the other day.
Yeah,
the other year, I should say.
As a guest of the Liberals.
Yeah, because it does say collaborator. So that guy wasn't necessarily a Nazi, but he did work with the Nazis, didn't he?
And then ramping up the fear of an invasion here. You put this in here. American invasion of Canada would spark decades-long insurgency. Again, I mean, seems to me like pure, utter nonsense. But again, they like to keep it alive because keep the fear up. And like anything, like Alexander the Great from anywhere, it's easy to like probably wipe out Canadians' defenses, but like to occupy a country is another thing. We've seen that in Afghanistan, Iraq, and all the way back to Alexander the Great and many other occupations. Occupations do not work.
Yeah, or maybe you have to do it in a certain way, and there needs to be a political settlement, doesn't there, if you're actually interested in conquering a country for real. But yeah, I mean, it's not really possible to do it unless you just go in there like Julius Caesar and just massacre everybody. But I don't think the Americans would do that.
No, I mean that's why I say this is just utter nonsense. So, but it definitely serves a purpose right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it certainly gives a lot of academics. Like this article is just full of professors and whatnot. It gives them something to do, doesn't it? It gets them in the
But
newspapers.
But it also serves the need to drive fear and say, like, when Chrystia Freeland said we're going to expect tanks in the streets and that we need to get nuclear weapons and all that stuff. And it's just utter nonsense, right? Just to drive fear. Utter nonsense. Another U.S. state saying they're going to eliminate state taxes, Mississippi. So they just eliminated, although that is a delay. I think it's in 2030 they'll actually eliminate state taxes. But there you go. And in Canada and BC especially, they should actually have a holiday here called New Tax Day, and they can introduce all the new taxes because 33 new taxes in British Columbia since the NDP took power. That's pretty impressive, no? I wonder what the record is.
Yeah. Although Mississippi's not in the best, not the healthiest state in America, I must say. I've been there actually and quite enjoyed my time, but it's not. I mean, it's a funny old place, Mississippi. I don't know what they're gonna cut back on to achieve this, but Mississippi has one of the highest poverty rates in
Yeah,
America as
I
well.
think
So
it's one of the poorest states in the U.S. and Canada is, I think, below that. And per capita
in
GDP
terms of GDP per capita,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We're
But I'm
actually
just
below.
thinking like quality of life. I think
Yeah.
you might be able to earn more money, but then because services aren't there, your life is probably going to be harder.
They do have a
But yeah,
river.
I don't know what they're going to get rid of there because it has a lot of need in that state.
Well, they do have a river, and it's a cool thing to spell with that poem. There you go, MISSI.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to kind of like rush here because we're supposed to be done around 10 here. So in the markets, gold looking strong, looks like it wants to go, eh? The uncertainty and Trump's tariffs, taking front and center here because like it's, supposedly happening April 2nd, right? Which is Fool's Day is tomorrow. We'll be on Fool's Day. Hopefully we're going to be on time and be able to do this show without a lot of stress and clinks and clunks. But yeah, so gold looking strong. Crypto, there you go. Crypto still building that base there, but it looks like it still wants to run higher. So there you go. Crypto, here's your opportunity. Canadian dollar, under 70 cents. Not really liking what's going to happen possibly tomorrow. Again, looking for direction. And the market itself on this tariff thing down, like that board's all red. Those are the big stocks. And there you go. Stock market having a tough time. In our AI and tech section, we're going to go a little faster here. Sam Altman says it's everybody's really starting to love the images on ChatGPT and stuff like that, but he says his GPUs are melting. And then so he's going to temporarily reduce some of the rate limits on people that don't pay. So free is just going to get less and less and less, right? So you're going to be allowed 3 generations per day. There you go. And then lots of...
all he ever seems to say, Sam Altman, is our GPUs are melting. It's like, fix it then.
H&M, we don't have an image for this, but H&M introduces AI twins for fashion models. And a lot of people are doing it, including Czech Creative here in town. We got an AI influencer working for Kelowna now. Her name is Elle. So you're going to see a lot more of this. Germany spent like a couple $1 million building out their AI influencer for the German tourism thing. So AI influencers starting to take hold all over the place in the world. And AI can also determine your age from drops of blood. I think you'll need about 5 drops of blood. The Japanese have developed this, and it can actually tell your age, right? Look at that, eh? And also it can tell your real age. Like, there's your, like your actual chronological age, and then there's your body age, right? A lot of people are actually, aging faster than the clock, or some people are actually reversing their aging, right? This, because it's your biological age and your chronological age are two different things, right? So this simple blood test can actually see how much healthier you are. And that's one of the things I really focus on is in health. And eating better is the big solution. Then I dropped about 55 pounds, about, going on 6 years now, and kept it off. And a lot of it has to do with what you put into your mouth. So there you go. And our last piece in this tech thing, we had a little bit of a video. Nick, do you have this video for this rocket? Or yep. So the Germans, a German upstart, Isar Aerospace is looking to compete with SpaceX, and here's their flight here. Didn't last though. You can probably jump ahead to around the 35-second mark there. Or just let it go. And there it's coming down. There you go. So that was the first attempt at orbital flight to come from Europe. So that was the Europeans attempting to get into space.
I wouldn't write them off. They'll get there. I mean, the American space program was basically Europeans anyway. They'd just been in a way like intellectual theft by the Americans. They just brought them over to the US. And speaking of Nazis, as we were earlier, it was a Nazi that was in charge of it. So I'm sure the Germans will figure it out.
And in all fairness, SpaceX, I think, was like one explosion away from being done too. I think they exploded like 3 rockets, and their 4th attempt was viable, and they said they wouldn't have survived if the 4th one blew up or something like that. So you can go check that. But it's like that. Elon was resting a lot on that, getting them into space, and since then, SpaceX launches more rockets than I think all the others combined, and includes the Chinese government. So lots of people into the space race. Definitely SpaceX and NASA leading the way, right? Well, SpaceX leading the way, but they partnered with NASA. Again, SpaceX is a military contractor. But we got some memes to show you, and then we're done. How's that? I don't know which one's more dangerous for you. Hugging the bowl after a lot of alcohol, or just all the bad food you eat after the marijuana?
I think this meme kind of is a weird one, because I think you could swap those and it would still be pretty accurate. So I think it applies to both of those.
There you go. And then our friend Holly Doan actually put out a meme here, and this one is actually pretty good in Otter News. So they hired this fact checker for CTV, and she's been not known for facts, right? And so they say that, the news, we have actual fact checkers who know all the facts. Why not just create news that give us facts and then call that the news? Hey?
It is a little bit ludicrous, isn't it? This fact checker job title, which is just what journalists are supposed to do anyway.
There you go. And then our friends at Babylon Bee, the rat colony beneath DC, disgusted to find city infested with politicians. And then this last one, we're just going to leave it there. This is the Department of Government, or U.S. Aid. There's the lock on the door.
Yeah, very interesting.
Draw your own conclusions on that meme, right? There you go. That's our show for today. Sorry about the glitches. Sorry about the chunky chunk stuff, but we're back tomorrow. Traffic flowing, socked in here in Kelowna, raining, and hoping for sunshine. And we'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Hopefully on the dime at 9 a.m. And we thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.